Aloha, thank you everybody for joining us for Chinwagging About Energy. I'm your host, Fred Brooks. I've been involved in the renewable energy field since 2006 after I did 8.5 years in the Navy running power plants. So I've had some time in the energy industry. I own my own operations and maintenance company on photovoltaic systems, and I'm a certified energy manager, a certified energy auditor, and a certified thermographer, and we do thermal imagery work on energy systems. And that is the sound of the door opening from the ghost.
We got ghosts, man. That's great.
Today, basically, we're going to be chinwagging about energy. We're going to be talking about where's your energy coming from. We're talking on a general level to give you a general idea of how the energy comes in and out of your house and how you get it, and thanking the partners that we have to get it so it comes to your house and you get out of your nice conveniences of turning the lights on, air conditioning, and getting everything going. It's a pretty amazing idea. The concept of these podcasts are going to be that we're going to talk about a pretty intense subject, but make it real simple to hear and easy to speak about. I'm really excited. Today's guest is going to be James McKay. He's a certified energy manager. He's lead AP, and he's the energy solutions partner for Ameresco out in Hawaii. James has been involved in the renewable energy field for over 8 years now in Hawaii, and he comes from Australia and is really truly passionate about energy, renewable energy, the environment, works with sustainable coastlines, has a really good feel for the land. One of the big things we have in common is we really want to take care of the land and the ocean and the sea for us and for the future. So it's really great. I'd like to introduce him, and thanks again for tuning in to Chinwagging About Energy. It's a really amazing time that we have out here, and thanks a lot. Have a great day.
There's mosquitoes on the river.
Today's the first episode. Got a couple people down in Wildlife Studios with us enjoying the first episode, and some poo-poos and a couple of nice libations. Very nice libations. We have Jason, who's helping running the system and getting everything going.
Yeah.
We got Mr. Knight sitting and spectating and giving commentary as long as we go. And the guest speaker for the day is, without introduction, it's Mr. James McKay. Everybody knows who he is. A renewable energy expert, energy efficiency. He's been in the field for many years, and he's bringing his expertise our way and his great knowledge of storytelling to be able to help explain today. Today's topic is basically going to be, where do we get our energy from? This sounds like a simple topic, but a lot of people are pretty confused about how it goes. James, say hello.
Well, aloha. Thank you, Fred. Thank you for hosting. Ingenious platform we have going. So I'm honored to be the virgin candidate.
Use that term loosely, James. All right, perfect. So, like I said, we're going to be asking, the whole idea about this podcast is explaining bigger subject matter in easier terms so people get a general idea of it. So, like I said, where do we get our electricity from? How do I get it when I turn the light on and switch in my house? How do I get it? Someplace out there got little squirrels getting 120 volts sent to me the whole way.
Hamsters on a wheel. Yeah, well, actually, you said energy. So first, it's I kind of like to think of power network, also known as the grid, very much like the circulatory systems in our body, right? So it's a network of things, to keep it dumbed down, since we're having a beer or three. So you got to get your energy from somewhere. Like matter is not created or destroyed. It's going to be coming from somewhere, going somewhere else. So we've got a generation on one side, which, so for the body analogy, it could be like your food. You got to get your energy from somewhere. Just like our power grid, it's got to come from somewhere. So every grid is different. Hawaii is a special grid compared to the mainland, and it's different from other parts of the world as well. So since we're in Hawaii, and that's really all I care about right now, that's what I think I will talk about. Because although you will be a global fame and fortune guy, we know that, but we can start in Hawaii and spread across the globe from here. Hawaii's grid's different. We have generation in each island is one utility, which makes it very different from the mainland US. And that has consequences on all sorts of aspects of living here. But the grid, as it is called, utility, Hawaiian Electric Industries, everywhere but Kauai, where it's Kauai Cooperative, KOUC, who runs that grid, is predominantly fueled from a substance that's very strange for a utility to operate, and it means that we're actually one of the most expensive places to live and pay our utility bills. So we're the only grid in the US that's powered by diesel fuel. And I should have started off, I'm not an electrical engineer. I've never worked with utility, so I have no idea what I'm actually talking about. But the consequences of the learning is from on the other side of working in energy is the energy efficiency side and renewable energy side. I've kind of learnt what the layout of the grid is, from how do we integrate renewables and energy efficiency into the lifestyles and businesses across Hawaii. So it's an important thing to understand, even though you can kind of take it for granted. When you turn on your light switch, the lights go on. Plug in the refrigerator, your beers get cold. It's kind of what people are about. Most people don't actually think about where that energy is coming from, which is a kind of a blessing of modern life, in that we can be kind of stupid and still have quite a successful life, in inverted commas. That you can be ignorant of those things. It's taken for granted by, I'd say, the huge majority of people. It's worthwhile knowing, though, I think, where that source comes from, because it does impact our cost of living, which as a result impacts everything else that we have to do in Hawaii, which is why I got into the energy field to begin with anyway, because any family, community, municipality, business is impacted by their cost of doing whatever they do as a result of what they do. Air conditioning, lighting, transportation is a huge one, which we won't talk about right now, but that's probably going to be another podcast, I'm sure. But the grid itself is powered predominantly from bunker fuel that gets shipped into Hawaii every day. So I kind of view it as, really, if you just think of Hawaii's grid as a giant car, and we pump oil into this giant burner, which the utilities own, and they crank it out and send it through what's known as a transmission line, which is a high voltage line. And then that's sent from the generation plant across their transmission lines to various substations. So similar to the circulatory, the blood system, it's like your network of veins and arteries, capillaries that go down to where you are in your chair with your beer and your refrigerator, and it steps down. It actually steps down the voltage. The high voltage lines are from the generation side through the transmission lines, step down through what's called a substation to distribution channels to where we live, work, and do stuff that's useful energy. And that's kind of what they bill you for. Every item that you're using energy for has a load, it's called, has a amount of energy it needs to do whatever it needs to do. So your refrigerator takes a certain amount of watts to keep that cold, and a light bulb has a certain amount of wattage to actually turn on. So a lot of what we do in our company with Amoresco is we do efficiency work. So we want to have the lowest load to do the same need. So your most efficient refrigerator uses lower wattage to keep your beer just as cold. And that's the most effective way to keep your beer cold, and it means you pay less money to have cold beer than a very ineffective refrigerator, which we unfortunately see very often in Hawaii, sitting in the sun in the garage in Waianae, and their refrigerator still works, even though it's 30 years old. That's very expensive cold beer. So, it's an interesting business to be in, as you know, Fred.
Yes.
It's never boring.
Not at all.
Always things that are going to come up you don't expect, and while it should be predictable and manageable, it's kind of moving sands.
Gotcha.
So the understanding of the grid, even though it's not kind of really talked about, it's kind of just an assumed area of life that we take for granted. I think it's really important. I'd say for the keiki of Hawaii, like, we are transforming the grid in Hawaii everywhere today. We're adding unprecedented amounts of renewable energy sources to the grid in conjunction with utility, independently from the utility. The utility is now increasingly adopting more of their own generation in a renewable way. But predominantly, the old grid, we could say, it was really a one-way system. It went from the generation plants, which was diesel bunker fuel predominantly. We do have some coal here, which I speak funny. I've got the down under accent, and we do have coal from Indonesia and Australia, which is scheduled to be closed down, that plant, by 2021 or 22, I think. For our renewable energy targets we have as a state, which is a good thing. So the traditional ways of powering our grid are very cost ineffective and heavily polluting. If the climate change argument is strong within me, so that's why I also do what I do.
So let me interject here just to give a couple little ideas on the grid system. You have what's called your firm generation, and there's other independent power producers that we have in Hawaii specifically. So out on Oahu, we're going to stick with the Oahu right now. We have basically 4 plants that are called your firm generation plants. And this is what stabilizes the grid, basically, right? Because we want to keep grid stabilization to keep it, because when we're dealing with the electricity lines, we know we want to keep them balanced and not bring it up. So on Oahu, we have Kahe Power Plant, which is a 650 megawatt plant. Then we have Waiau Power Plant, which is a 500 megawatt. And then Campbell Industrial Park is a 130 megawatt. And then Schofields is a biofuel diesel fuel plant. That's a 50 megawatt plant that they're doing. And there's several other independent power producers that the grid gets to tap into. So when we're talking about the grid and we're talking about firm energy, you're going to have each one of those power plants, basically, if I say it's 650 megawatts, you can't produce any more than that, right?
Well, I can't. No, yeah. I'd like to, but yeah, probably not today.
But
yeah,
so,
it's so the base load is. So I guess going back to the analogy of the blood system, a good way of thinking about it would be, say, blood pressure. We want to keep a constant blood pressure, and that's so the grid. The generation has to be balanced with the load or the demand.
God, that's a super good analogy.
Thank you. I just made that up, actually. So it's like I actually hate blood. I knew I was never going to be a doctor, but we want to keep a consistent blood pressure or like voltage, where the appliances that the consumer or the business have, they can rely on good quality power, where it's going to do what that job is supposed to do without the surprise.
So that's when we have our firm power. And then because we have, you didn't mention it because we talked about the basic generation of the power plant. We're keeping the base loads going. Then we're gonna have like peak loads. So that's why there's other independent power plants that the grid can tap into. So I'm trying to get this figured out. So you have, we're using, just say we're using up to the number 10. All of a sudden the power plant can only produce 10, and this is like the speaker from Spinal Tap. It goes up to 11. All of a sudden, we need to go up to 11. Now, if we do that on the regular power plant, if you all of a sudden you start putting too much power down a line, what could be possible faults on one of the powers coming down the line? You had too much energy. You can't. Can it hold it, or what happens?
No, that would be a question you know the answer to, so I know that's a test. But generally, it has to go somewhere. It's again like a blood flow. It's a pressure, and they use the hose analogy too for irrigation. It's going to be flowing somewhere. So if it's not used, it can be dumped to ground if there's an oversupply. So currently, right now, one of the issues that the utility is facing, not just Oahu, but a lot of the islands, with the amount of solar we have here, we have some very big solar farms that have come online, and more are going to come online. So we have a solar peak in the middle of the day where there's a lot of generation from those solar systems. So we've had base load traditional power plants going, the 4 that you impressively memorized all the capacity on all that, but they're still here, right? So they're cranking. We add the solar to that during the middle of the day. That the solar kicks in, and that spike is now causing problems with the grid. So the utility has had to manage this 2-way flow, whereas traditionally it was always a 1-way flow. And that's something that it's going to be increasingly interesting for the utility engineers to manage that spike in generation.
Gotcha. Because basically, since we're dealing with AC, so home energy use. You're taking it. You got a PV system on the top. You're not using your demand, so you got to send it back. So since it's an AC line, it's allowed to take it back and forth, and the AC line. So we know sometimes
Alternating current, your house system, right?
So we'll sit there. Sometimes you'll hear the utilities say they have 146 kVA lines that drop down to 33 kVA, and then somehow it magically gets into your house. How does you mentioned the transformers step down? So
yeah, it's a conversion technology, and I'm sure you'll have other experts on this show later that can actually go into really how it works. From my black box view, which has none of the widgets, basically it is different horses for different courses. So you've got your high voltage kVA lines, the ones, the transmission that is needed to move the power rapidly from a generation point to the distribution point. And then they don't want that high voltage at that area because they don't need it. It's basically going to be getting used in a different way. And then it gets stepped down through transformers, which are capacitor banks, basically giant metal magnets that will adjust the voltage to what that need is. Then again, they get stepped down to the end user, we'd say, the consumer. And at that point, that's where you have your utility here, or Wahoo, the HECO bill. Every user of energy is going to have a meter, which has a number when that's on your energy bill, and very few people even read their energy bill. It's below 1.6%. I think I checked this morning of people that actually read the facts on their energy bill. And also learned that 98% of statistics are just made up for a discussion point on a podcast.
Perfect,
too.
exactly. Especially on podcasts.
Yeah.
98.6%.
It's actually lower on other forms, but podcasts are really high. But
Especially.
no one reads their utility bill and really most people don't understand it, and it's probably not made to be understood, quite frankly. But your usage, you're billed by demand, as you just alluded to. So the demand is when you might have an unusual amount of energy required to do whatever you're trying to do. And that doesn't impact the residential customer so much because their load or their needs are pretty simple and predictable. It's a demand fee might impact an industrial facility or a commercial facility that has giant coolers or industrial equipment that takes a lot of energy really quickly. The utility has to react to that really quickly, and you're billed for that. Whereas the usage is kind of how many, it's called kilowatt hours. You'll see on your bill, kWh. So that's on the end of the line. It's called your AC low voltage is really what you're billed for. But to get to you, it's still got to go through that whole process of getting stepped down. And I don't think those kind of networks are really publicly advertised because it is a security issue too.
Thank you for that sound, Jason.
Yeah, man,
your mic still works.
It's like a fucking guitar. It's cool.
It's good, sensitive.
Sensitive, we like it.
Energy's working.
Energy's working. We got good energy. So basically, we're talking that the utility will start it up. We're talking megawatts. 650 megawatts is a large amount of energy, and a house on a daily basis for 4 people only use 30 kilowatts. So the amount of generation is a lot. So we're coming down big power lines from the utility, and they have to distribute it, and then we'll step it down at substations so we can feed the arteries and capillaries out there. And then it goes to your home and it's stepped down. So the utility sits there, and that's where your firm energy comes from. And we're stabilizing it. So while we have that, everybody talks about grid saturation and I can't put more solar on my house. The reality is it because the power lines can only handle so much? If there's, just say you have every single house has solar panels on it, and then all of a sudden, the middle of the day we spike, and your generation from the PV panels is greater than that size of line. Is that going to be any good, or what's going to happen?
Well, it depends who you ask. The utilities had an interesting stance over the years. I've only lived here 8 years, but I've seen them adjust this danger red light. They did, red line areas that you weren't allowed to install more solar. Then all of a sudden, there's a study from Germany that says their levels are 4 times what the utility was black banding or redlining this area. So they're like, oh, so it's not a technical issue. Maybe that's not valid, because really, and that's where I come back to, unfortunately, the money aspect of it all. Solar energy unlike the utility where the fuel's coming in from an imported foreign source, which I think we pay something like $8 billion a year, something insane as a state, goes out of our state to buy that resource to keep our lights going and our beer cold. Whereas solar, its source is coming from the sun, from the sky, every day for free. You got to buy this little module things to collect the sun, but essentially the source of your energy is coming up above you. You don't have to drive a barge across the ocean. So there's a profit motive where suddenly we're not talking about engineering and technology anymore. We're now talking about business and profit motives and policies and stuff like that. So yeah, the answer is complicated. Again, going back, I'm not an electrical engineer. I haven't worked on critical grid fry outs about solar saturation, but based on what I've seen over the years here is that the utility has said, oh, this is a dangerous point. We can't ever transcend that point. Otherwise, everyone's going to blow up and die. 3 years later, all of a sudden, we're 3 times that level. No one's blown up and died yet. So I guess, I'd question that red line solar saturation point. I hope at some point we will get there. But what's also happened as that solar saturation issue has come on is that the clean energy industry has reacted with all sorts of mechanisms for storing the energy instead of dumping it to ground and wasting that energy if it can't be used. Now the solar battery industry has come on very quickly, and we're seeing all sorts of very interesting technologies in regards with even say flywheels, things that have come on, proof of concept to store energy when it's at a saturation point. And that's what we are going to need to get to 100% renewable.
Perfect. So just one other point, because we started talking about the utility, where the energy is coming from, and we just talked about the diesel plants and the oil and everything like that coming here. So, but now we have solar farms, you mentioned it, we got wind farms and everything. Is that the same type of setup? Is that they making that energy over there? Because these are big plants, you know what I mean? Mm. So how do they get their energy to be able to distribute to the grid? Do they have their own substations on site, and they have to be connected through the utility? And
yeah, generally, most generation plants like that have to be grid tied.
I know what that sound is. Need another one.
Let's have a refill. So yeah, things run out, right? Nothing's in perpetuity except for protection of our iron, of course. But they're an alternative energy source to the utility. They don't usually let them connect to the utility until the utility knows there's a need in that area. So, they're not going to build a giant solar farm and wind station right next to a traditional generation plant right now, unless they know they have the capacity for that. We'll do another one. Just doing
beer passing around.
So they're generally those facilities are paid. They're private entity money, so separate companies run those facilities and they get paid for their output if they're not owned by the utility directly. So it's in the interest of the business owner that's paid for that system to ensure that it's going to be not only working and producing, so it's be properly maintained, but also the utility before that's even built knows that they need it in that location.
Perfect. So there's basically a lot that goes on infrastructure-wise that allows us the ease and performance of being able to go home and flip a light switch or press a button and remotely turn on your air conditioner because it's now 4 feet away from you instead of stepping up and turning the switch on and getting yourself cold. It's basically it starts at a big power plant with a lot of work on it, and transmission lines come down. Substation feeds out to different areas on the grid, so that's why sometimes if we have a power outage, it only affects a certain area because it goes back to the substation. And then just one last item that we talk about with the grid and trying to become a smart grid is there's a little item of curtailment that we're going to deal with that on another episode. So the basic level right now is this is where your energy comes from, and remember it keeps getting stepped down because they make a lot of energy at once, and if you plug directly into that from your house, I don't think your house lid would do good. Sort of like that moped that just rode past.
Yeah,
us.
that was good timing.
That was
I like that. It was like
It was like
Serendipity.
we meant to put them on there.
An
But
oversupply
Yeah,
of
so it
energy
goes.
at one shot.
is there anything else you want to talk about? How we get electricity to our house, or
Well, I think it's just good for people to know where their energy comes from. I think that's the main thing. You know, you are in the solar industry yourself on the maintenance side of making sure that people's assets are properly performing. So I think that's important because that's related with this. So like we want to ensure that we're working with the utility. Obviously, the utility serves, as you just covered, an essential part of people's lives here, whether they appreciate it or not. The utility guys work really hard to keep the grid going. It's going to be a partnership, as I see it, between the utility, the consumer, the residents, the businesses, and the businesses that are adding these new regeneration forms of clean energy, wind and solar and other things that are going on there. So it's going to be an interesting path ahead. And I think the most exciting thing is that Hawaii is one of the leaders globally in this situation of where we are today. Australia also is cutting their teeth very quickly on storage technologies. But everything we do here is going to be setting the model for the world. So I think that's a great place for Hawaii to be. It's a great place for Hawaii's kids to be. We should be creating new, cool, awesome jobs that are going to be in demand globally. I think it's terrible that Hawaiian kids have to move away to find a different job that they can afford to live in a place that they're born. So I think we need to work on some new models, and I'm stoked to be part of it.
perfect. I really appreciate it. I really hope that people got to understand a little bit more. We're going to end up having more and more detailed discussions on different areas of the grid, but we wanted to give a good overview to let people really understand that there is a lot involved on how you get energy to your house, how it's brought there. It's not just magically appearing, which it can feel that way because you flip a switch and magically it sucks in the darkness and it gets light out there. And it's pretty impressive that way. And, you know, there's a lot of things going on. Like you mentioned, that the guys at the utility are always working, keeping our grid up and running, because keeping that firm grid, we've become so dependent on it. You know, people start getting brownouts and lose your laptop for a little bit, your day freaks out.
Yeah, I shouldn't be talking. That's happening at Honolulu Sky Harbor. You shouldn't be talking about laptops. A bit.
But no, I think it's really great. I appreciate you being here, Jason. Thanks a lot for being the sound man and taking care of things and keeping us going. Thank you, everybody. I want to thank our sponsor, Freddie McPhail's Not So Cheap Irish Scotch Whiskey from Ackletoobui. They're really enjoying it. You have to really say thank you to them. And our Scottish word of the day is numpty. Numpty is the Scottish word of the day. It means not the brightest person. For instance, I'm at the store, I'm shopping with Alistair, and he turns around and the person in front of us gets asked if they want paper or plastic, keeps trying to hand a credit card to him, and the person doesn't quite understand that they were asking what type of bag they wanted. That's a numpty. Thanks a lot for joining us on Chinwagging About Energy. We'll catch you on the next event. James, Mr. Evan Knight, thank you for joining and being part of the group and hanging out. Jason, thank you for everything. Have an amazing day, everyone. Aloha.
Numpty.
Numpty.
Numpties.
Lord, the band kept us so busy, we forgot about the time.
Thank you so much, Mr. James McKay, for coming on Chinwagging About Energy. It was really great to talk to you, as it always is. I'd like to say to anybody who's out there, if you'd like to become on part of Chinwagging About Energy, or you have any comments or anything, you can use my email address with Pacific Panel Cleaners currently at fred@pacificpanelcleaners.com. The phone number would be 808-772-4705. 808-772-4705. Pacific Panel Cleaners, the original O&M company in the Hawaiian Islands for your photovoltaic needs. We really appreciate having people come in. If we had anything that was wrong on our podcast, let us know. I am more than happy to know. We have the ability to do Skype with you. We'll talk with you. We just like to see how everything's going. We just want to sit and chinwag about energy. If you've got thoughts about different energy that's out there, I'd be more than happy to hear it. I really appreciate you guys taking your time. You guys have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you soon. Aloha.
Aloha!
Hey, Fred, I just want to say thank you for hosting me on Chinwagging About Energy. And thank you so much for supporting OriginalPuzzleCompany.com, an amazing company that produces books that are a puzzle. So think of this as a video game, but in real life. Here's a book that you cannot open unless you solve the clue to that book. Then you open the next page, you cannot open the next one. Boom, there's the puzzle. What a beautiful gift, what a beautiful present to give to someone, loved one. Thank you, Fred. Visit us up at OriginalPuzzleCompany.com.